Abstentions? Motion carries. Donovan, you'll be ready for that change?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from September 27th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Who do I got for the mover? Eric has the mover. Dennis is the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Steve abstain. Motion carries. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from October 25th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Eric is the mover, and you guys can't fight over it. And Gary will second. Any changes to the minutes? I have one on the application for 217th. My comments were in regards to the total accessory structure should not exceed 1,500 square feet, not the one structure.
Can you reference the page number you're pointing to?
I think on our handout is page 10. Am I right on there? Maybe not.
Looks like it was on the bottom of page 10. Under
Yes.
C.
Yes. Number C. I think that Gerard did not think the accessory structures, the total accessory structure should exceed 1,500 square feet.
Structures.
If the seconder of the motion will accept, I'll accept that as an amendment.
Gary?
Yes, you bet.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. So we'll move to the new number 7, which is a variance for 7901 North Shore Trail. This is a variance, so there'll be a public hearing to consider the application. The way this will work this evening is the city will present the facts as they know them. The Planning Commission will then ask any questions and clarification. We will then ask the applicant if they'd like to say a few words, and then after that, we will hold a public hearing, and I'll give a little more instructions at that. That'll be the same format we'll be using for the Timber Ridge Apartments one also. So with that, I do have one comment before we start this variance. I personally am in the 350 feet notification zone of this variance. I checked with the city. I have no financial interest in this variance, so I am free to vote. Is that correct now? Did I state that correctly?
Yeah.
So if any commissioners would prefer I would abstain, just let me know. With that, Donovan, would you like to present?
Sure. Ashton, can I get video, please? I'd like to present the variance application for 7901 North Shore Trail. This variance has been applied for by the builder, Mr. Josh Hansen, who's here with us this evening. Here on the screen, I'll show you the basic location of this on an aerial. It's on my computer's frozen. It's on the North Shore of Second Lake, approximately just east of the North Shore Circle area. The parcel is currently vacant. There was a cabin that used to sit there. It's been demolished. The dimensions are, it's approximately 16,000 square feet. The variance request is to exceed the impervious maximum percentage of 25% by about 8%. So they're proposing 33% to locate a single-family home on that lot. And this is an application that we received the building permit, and I alerted the builder as to this shoreline area restriction, and he indicated his desire to go forward with a variance. And in discussions, I said that, the zoning code's pretty strict on this impervious surface maximum. And he stated that, are there other ways to mitigate this? And I said, well, the reason the rule is there is to protect lake water quality. And one approach that's not blessed by the zoning code, that maybe it's the future, but it currently isn't the code, would be to mitigate that through infiltration, through a rain garden. And I didn't mean to encourage him, but it turns out that what he did was actually bring forth a soil expert. As part of your package, he presented a narrative that by designing a rain garden to absorb the rainwater, basically could set a performance standard to have this site, if built, it would function something like a 9% impervious surface lot. Of course, this is, as noted in the staff report, there's still some unknown things on the amount of infiltration and soil conditions, but as presented, it's a 33% impervious variance request. The proposed structure meets all side setbacks, front, rear, and the right now there's been some concern also around the validity of the correctness of the survey. I was sent another survey by the applicant surveyor today. That's the paper copy you have in front of you. That Bolton and Menk surveyor, the city surveyor, does state it's correct. And this is actually is in contradiction to metal rods that are actually existing there that have been there for a number of years. We had a resident come in who was concerned about this. I still believe what was submitted today, I have still some questions around that. I just want to say that, but that's not the, any questions regarding the survey, in some ways could be settled later. That the variance request is this for the specific percentage, and if there had to be some modifications related to the home, based on a change in the survey in the future, that change could be made. We did get some comments from the site engineer around drainage, desire to have some sort of outlet for the rain garden. In your packet, you have one letter from a neighbor who is in opposition to granting the variance. And at this point, staff recommends Plan Commission denial of the requested variance to allow 33% impervious surface due to the applicant did not demonstrate unique circumstances of the property that would warrant a variance, and the submitted material did not show how a reasonable use of the lot was not possible without the requested variance, and the variance would not be consistent with the intent of the goals in zoning code and comprehensive plan to protect surface water resource quality. At this point, I'd like to get questions from the Plan Commission.
Any questions of the city?
There's a discrepancy in terms of the lot size. One says 16,094 and the other one says 17,213. Which is the actual correct square footage?
That's one of the questions I have as well. And I don't have a clear answer for that. Maybe Mr. Hanson has an answer for that one.
Yes, I'm the registered land surveyor who signed off on the survey. There is a slight discrepancy in the...
If you want, would you like to come up and...
Oh, sure.
We ask you to please step to the lectern here, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Alan Schlip, M&P Engineering. I'm a surveyor and engineer. Our office is in St. Paul, Minnesota. Regarding the question on the survey, there is a slight discrepancy in square footage. We've been talking to Russ Halverson regarding some boundary issues. We think we're getting it ironed out. Russ seems to agree with our survey now. He didn't before, but I personally did some research on this and looked at the legal descriptions. I believe our survey is correct.
The one that's dated yesterday?
Yes, yeah. However, I did not change the calculations. The calculations for stormwater runoff, I kept the areas as is. Rather than make it more confusing, I try to keep it as simple as possible.
So does that reduce the percentage at all?
That's what I was wondering.
That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out here.
I don't understand because I was trying to figure out the area to be treated, how you came to that figure. But I still came up with, and the existing driveway, there's some portion of it looks like there's a note that it's to be removed, but that impervious percentage is still included. So I believe there's some discrepancies.
It's very, very minor in my opinion. I mean, we're talking about a couple hundred square feet at most. I did not want to redo the calculations to make it more confusing than it already is. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. It was a difficult boundary survey. I spent a lot of time on it. I did a lot of research on it. I also did a lot of research on these rain gardens that we're proposing. I've designed many, many of them. They are very popular in the suburbs. I predict that Forest Lake will also have rain gardens soon. If you have any questions on how these rain gardens work, either Planning Commission or the public, I'd be happy to answer them. I have some literature with me that I could pass out to the council to give you an idea of how they work.
At this point, we're on questions for the city, but don't go too far because I'm sure the applicant will have a few words. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Donovan, the amount of impervious surface that's being requested at 33% is about 5,380. Is that correct? I believe that's the 33% of the 16-something square foot lot. But even with the 17,000 square foot lot, 25% of that is about 4,300 square feet that would be allowed.
Correct.
So he's over the amount no matter what.
Correct.
Even with this little bit calculation, a larger lot size, the applicant is still over the allotted 25% of impervious surface.
That's correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Dennis?
Are you confirming then that 5380 is what they're requesting for impervious?
What I calculate from, if you use the 17,000 square foot lot area, I come up with the 5647 figure for the amount of impervious. But that's adding up the latest survey. But I believe that's an error because there's some section of existing driveway to be removed. And I made request for the proposed driveway to be shown on this, and we have a note, but we don't actually have boundaries. So the applicant did not provide that information, so I do not know exactly how much impervious is being proposed.
Okay, another question, Donovan, is if I'm looking at the plan, it looks like you get 10 feet from the house to the lot on the, I'm going to say the east side. I think that's the east. But on the west side, there's 10.2 from the house to the lot, but the garage takes up Is that not true?
No, see that? See the arrows there?
Okay, but that's the house and here's the garage.
Yeah. But that is, this 10.
Oh, this is from this.
These two arrows.
So
here
it,
indicate-
so there is 10 feet on both sides from the building to the lot, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, my calculation on the 5,000 square feet was just adding the square footage of the house, the 44,336, plus the driveway, the 1,046 driveway. I was just adding those two numbers up and came up with the 5,300 and some square feet. So that's
But
how
where
I...
did you get the 44? He's got, on this survey that we were, today's survey, it's got the building area 4164.9, or essentially 4165.
4160.
If-
Well, I
if I
got that
could-
out of the staff report.
If I could interrupt, it's up to the applicant to present the data and for the plan commission then to make an assessment for the variance. So this is, I think that this is something the applicant needs to answer, not the planning commission.
Because if you add up the two, the building area is 4165 and the driveway is 898, that's 5,063 square feet. And I don't know what percentage that is of either 16,000 or 17,000.
Eric?
Hey, Donovan, can you further expand on your comments about potentially adding rain garden detail into policy? Is that at staff level, or has that been discussed at council or here and I missed it or something?
No, it's not been discussed at council. The city engineer and I have talked about how, in basically, these were adopted in 1999 as part of DNR statutes to protect storm lake water quality. But the actual the gross percentages don't really take into account different site conditions. I mean, it could be different soils, amount of vegetation, there could be buffers along the lake, and so sites could function very differently even though they could be the same percentage of impervious. And as we see continued, four-season home, habitation around the lake, or even just continue the cabin redeveloped to the homes, this more intensive use of these lots, and many of these lots are of limited size. I mean, this one actually does have decent, is a conforming lot size, but in order to not love the lake to death. Perhaps in the future, we do have standards, performance standards, that if a site can function as, let's say, a 25% site, then they could go forward without this sort of variance process. But I want to stress that the zoning code's not there yet. I just, as the way we deal often with applicants is that we offer, I try to offer them, okay, here's a potential pathway for you. And I didn't, I told the applicant that I would be a staff recommendation of denial, but here's a potential way that, you could do a variance. But, obviously the zoning code does not, at this moment recognize that as a potential avenue.
Thank you.
Other questions? Donovan, I have one. And on the survey and a house, it shows a proposed house with a 9-foot basement.
That also is incorrect. There's no basement proposed, single level, which is the intent of the owners. They'd like to, they're older and they like to have single level living. And the garage is not proposed. Unfortunately, it's still there on the survey.
You lost me on the second half of your statement there.
Oh, that's an error on the survey that says proposed basement.
Then
What
you
about
moved,
the garage?
then you moved on to garage, and then I got lost.
Oh, they want to have single level living, so a garage wouldn't be a part of that plan. I'm sorry, the basement would not be a part of that plan. There we go.
All right, now I'm
Sorry.
clear as mud here.
It's like
We're having
mad
a heck of a time here.
No garage, the garage is, he made a mistake.
Right. Any other questions for the city? Would the applicant like to say a few words? I'm sorry?
Hi, I'm Josh Hansen. I own JJH Homes. I graduated from Forest Lake a while back. And so basically this has come down to lake quality. Going to past impervious surface was what I felt was the biggest issue for why we're at the 25% number. So when talking with Donovan, and he had told me that, you know, zoning code can't accept that going past the 25%, I would have to go about getting a variance. I began talking to my engineers that I knew and said, so this is my issue I've got. My clients, you know, would really like to have a house that would, you know, not nearly as big as what they have currently, but, you know, to be an average size house of what most people are living in these days. The garage definitely makes it a little bit bigger, but, you know, it's not considerably bigger. So when talking with my engineers, they proposed that, you know, the other cities that they've worked with that are in acceptance of rain gardens right now, and not that Forest Lake isn't, they said that, you know, most cities will allow credits that will reduce against your impervious surface, which allows you to build a bigger house. We've got this house down to less than 10% impervious surface of runoff water going into the lake, which is substantial. And there are ways that we can get this even further, whether that's making the rain garden bigger or running, you do river rock along the concrete driveway to catch all that water also. So you really can get this down to a nearly you know, less than a 5% of water runoff into the lake, which is what I've been hearing is the biggest issue. Make sure that I don't have water going into my neighbors, and make sure I don't have water going into the lake that is contaminating the lake. Otherwise, I think Forest Lake would be closer to a 30 or 35% impervious surface of building. So we've ran the numbers and we've gotten it down to as low as we can. Now, if the new survey is correct and we're running off those numbers, we're closer to only 5% over the allotted 25% impervious surface. But I think that whatever the number is, whether it's 30% impervious surface, 33% impervious surface, or 25% impervious surface, the real issue here is making sure that our water coming off the impervious surface areas are not entering the lake and causing lake issues. The rain gardens, if you do a little bit of research on them, are very easy to run. As soon as they're put in, they pretty much run themselves, and then you just have to check them anywhere from 10 to 15 years to make sure that silt hasn't run into them and causing it to not work correctly. The cost to fix it is very minimal, so it would behoove the resident, the current occupant, to, you know, check on it and make sure it's running correctly. And to make sure it's running correctly is all of either putting have grass growing over it, because all it is a dip in the ground and then different kind of soil that we excavate out and put in, or that would be a perennial garden area, which would be very eye appeasing to the neighbors and the residents around you. So it's not, rain gardens are not going to be something that's, you know, ugly on the eye or difficult to maintain. So it ends up being something that helps the lake per se. So basically, talking with Donovan, I'm your guys' guinea pig here. And whether this starts now or comes in later, you know, it most likely will eventually come to Forest Lake, and there'll be even more research on rain gardens by then. Right now, I know of the Hugo, the city hall right there. They have a rain garden right in front of their city hall there. Montemedi, White Bear, Blaine. I mean, those are other towns in the area that are in acceptance of rain gardens. Not that it means anything because we're in Forest Lake, but it's something good to be known. And then the last thing I'd kind of like to say is, it's, if we're really working on water quality for Forest Lake, and that's our biggest issue here, or hurdle, I hope that you've seen that we've, given you guys some design and some showing here to make it an acceptable proposal for building a little bit over the 25% allotted impervious surface. So, and there are neighbors, on the right and left that are bigger than this house, but this will be the first house that will be really catching that water, so, and treating it correctly. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? Mike?
You say they don't have to be maintained for 10 to 15 years?
Yep,
Where'd you get that data from?
I got that from the engineer that designed it.
'Cause I've got over 6-7 years in rain gardens, and every fall, all the foliage in there most of it has to be cut down, trimmed out. They're usually installed where there's gutters and catch basins,
Yep,
so that runoff does not go into the catch basins and then end up to your lakes, ponds, and streams. Now, I believe out there's no gutters, catch basins, or anything, is there? It's just runoff from the road into the gravel and then property?
there's no house.
There's no curbing along the road.
No, there's not.
Okay. So you're only dealing with a small amount of water or whatever, rainwater runoff that's as wide as that property.
Correct.
So a rain garden in that particular location isn't really, it's a small amount of water that it's
Correct.
gonna be catching. And the homeowner, is this right, where the homeowner's gonna be responsible for maintaining that?
Yep.
Rain garden? So I know in other cities, the city I work in, the city has to maintain them. Over the years, homeowners have gone out there, put down sand tubes. They've even on the weekends when no public works are around, they've cemented them up. They don't want the mosquito infested areas in their yard. It gets to be a cat and mouse game with the catch basins. And they are a lot of work, and it's not 10 to 15 years.
Okay. Well, as far as the concreting it, I mean, that'd be a pretty noticeable thing that they would be at the maximum here already. So, I mean, to be able to concrete in something.
Well, I'm not
Would-
saying concrete it in. No, I'm saying most of the rain gardens in these cities, they install them where there's already curbing and gutters. They don't put them out in the middle of the highways, or gravel roads where the water runs off into the ditches. They don't put rain gardens out there.
Sure. But
I've never seen one yet, so.
I guess the way this one was proposed was not right next to the road. I mean, this was gonna be, if you look at the survey, it's gonna be, it'll be a 20 by 20 section, and it can be bigger at that point. So, the rain garden was proposed to be right off the front of the house here. So that's gonna be a good 20 feet off the road. I mean, are you thinking that the runoff from the,
Well, the diagram here doesn't really show exactly where the rain garden is. It doesn't have a.
Sure.
It just says proposed rain garden.
okay,
It's like,
it'd be, I think I can't remember now. What was proposed and what the engineer talked to me about this morning was, just put a bigger one in than what we're talking about, and it'll do even more. I mean, but I guess as a foliage, I mean, are you thinking that they're not?
Depends on what they planted it.
Sure, but if it's grass, it's a matter of mowing over it, and if it's perennials, I mean, you're not gonna mow over the
Grass, why
perennials.
Put a rain garden in there. It was just grass. I mean, you've already got grass in the yard, right?
Well, but it still has to be a dip in the yard. It still has to be below what your natural grade is, and then it's a dip down, is how he explained it to me.
You're just calling it a rain garden. It's just a dip in the soil.
No, you have to dig out, I think it's 4 feet, and then you have to bring it back in. It's basically similar to compost, and that ends up being about 6 inches below your natural grade, and then you have everything dive into it from around the edges.
But when you look at where you're proposing that, you're actually only treating the water that comes off of the street onto the property. You're not
The gutters, and so all the rain coming off the house will have to be directed into that rain garden for this to work.
Can you pull the slide out on the right side of the podium and put the map up there and show us where you plan to have this rain garden?
Ashton, can you, or no?
This will take a minute.
It would be in this section here, and that's.
hand out some of this? It might be easier for you to see.
Well, we'd
I
like
can
it
tell you
for-
with what we got here right now, I don't think there's anybody sitting at this table here that could make a decision on this, because we don't have information. The information that you just gave us is not on this drawing that we have right here.
Sure.
There's a bigger issue here than rain gardens.
Yeah, 16,000, 17,000.
There, and, I mean, you can talk till you're blue in the face about rain gardens if you want to, but that's only part of the issue here. And I want to know what the area, I want to know what the footprint area, including the garage, is of the house, and I want to know what the area of the paved part of the driveway, or the paved driveway is. So I can figure a percentage here of what part of the site is being covered by impervious. And I can't, there's nothing here in either the written information that we've been given or the graphic information that I've been able to, and I'm an architect, I work with this kind of stuff, not necessarily every day, but I work with it, I've worked with it over and over again. I understand what rain gardens are, I understand what surveys are, and I apologize if but this, I can't, there's nothing on this survey that tells me what's gonna happen to the water on this site. It looks to me like there are existing contours on here. There's no proposed contours on here. There's nothing that shows how the water's going to flow on the site or off the site. Those are what our concerns are. This rain garden issue is a very small part of it. But I first have to know what the total area of the footprint of the house is and the drive, and then I can figure a percentage, and, you know, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt of the larger lot, but I still want that information. If you can't show me that information, I'm either not gonna vote on this, or I'm gonna vote no, because I don't have enough information here.
Well, I think the mistake that I made, I'll take the rap for it. I wanted to keep the soils, engineers, numbers the same. I didn't want to turn in two sets of numbers, so I kept his numbers. Our survey, because of the boundary issues, changed a little bit. Yes, it did.
Yeah, but it would be actually to your favor and you know,
Yep.
so,
So what-
and we're willing to give you the benefit of the doubt of that, but we still don't have enough new
So
information,
what is the
old
exact square
information,
footage
soils
of the
information. We don't have enough information
house and lot
to
as
make
he
that
wants?
most basic calculation
Yep.
accurately.
And the information that we do have isn't accurate. I mean, one says one thing, the other says the other thing, and they both come up with the same percentage, which doesn't make sense. So I think the accuracy of the information is a big deal.
So do we
Now,
have
we're not
that?
trying to be difficult here. We're trying to
Nope.
figure out how this thing works, but there's not enough information here for us to be able to do that at this point.
So do we have the square footage of the lot?
Yeah.
Yes, we have current, accurate
Okay,
numbers.
so-
Absolutely.
Can you give us
So-
those three numbers? Can you just give us, can you give us those three numbers so that we can write them down?
Yeah, sure. The numbers that I have on my survey are the latest numbers per survey. Like I say, I didn't want to confuse everybody with using the
We've
soil
heard that
engineer's
several times,
numbers.
yep.
May I pass some of this around?
Let's just give
Can
them
you
the
just
three
tell us
numbers.
the numbers?
Do you have that?
Yeah, I think my glasses.
So the lot area is 17,213.
Okay.
The building area is, that's gonna be added together though. The building area is 4,164, plus the driveway, which is 898.
Okay. Those are the three numbers that I'm looking for.
Okay.
Okay, so that's how we come up with the 5,063. All right. So, the total area of the impervious surface that the design is 5,063 and change. Are we in agreement on that?
Yep.
Okay.
And I calculate the 25% of the 17,213, the allotted impervious surface coverage is 4,303. So he's over by about 700 square feet.
We're looking at it
What
another
percent?
way, he's
8%.
at 29%.
Is that 29?
Yep. Yeah, I wanted to get, there was, now I have a magnitude number here. We're looking about 4.4% delta here.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question
Sure.
to the applicant? Is the owner here?
The owner is not here, he could not make it.
Do you know, does the owner, where is the title of the property? Does the owner own the property?
Yep,
Is he closed?
yeah, he lives in Lino Lakes.
But he's in fee title of the property. He does own the property.
He owns the property, yep.
Other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. There may be more later. This is a public hearing. The way this will work this evening is if you would like to speak to this issue, we ask that you come up to the lectern, state your name and address for the record, and give us your input on this application. We will, once we've heard from all interested parties, we will close the public hearing. We'll then bring it back to the Planning Commission for a final decision. So with that, we'll open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak to this issue?
My name is Donna Johnson. I live at 2094A Granada Avenue North in Forest Lake, Minnesota. I grew up on the property that's adjacent to the proposed plan. I grew up on the 7911 property, one of those cabins that is a home. My mother is 80 years old, lives there currently. I just want to give you a indication of a worry that I have. I started living there when I was 10 years old. And oftentimes in the front yard, it was wet. Wet to the point where we never needed to sprinkle the lawn, water the lawn. There was a lot of collected water in the front area by the lake. The slope from the property goes down and a lot of water collects there. My concern is if you build a big lot with the impervious structure and driveway, that more water, regardless of a rain garden, is going to flow into my mother's lot. It's very wet there. I don't know if they've been there when it rains. I don't know if they've done soil samples. I'm sure they have. But the water does not move in that area. It flows into my mother's yard. You can see that even the grade suggests that that's where the water ends up. And it's going to be extremely wet if you build a large home on this new lot. We've had trouble with that my whole life. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the issue?
My name is Bruce Wolfbauer. I live at 607 8th Avenue Northwest in the city of Forest Lake. I'm also part of this family here, and as Donna spoke, I'm concerned about the same things. After hearing the bit about the rain garden, my main concern is that the maintenance issue, again, something that's not on the zoning or ordinances or anything, it's just kind of like it's out there, but there's nothing to force the owner to take care of it and maintain it years down the road, or 3 years from now, or 10 years from now at this point. And if it does come on the books as some sort of a zoning issue, where they're going to use these in the future, that this may be even exempt, being put in and allowed to be used before the laws are put into effect concerning the rain garden. So, and like Donna said, that it is very wet there, and I think she's also concerned that her property may even be devalued with the extra rain water runoff if the rain garden fails. I think there's a lot of issues that are up in the air, a lot of questions, more questions than answers, as you all know. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Josh Parker. I live at the residence at 7881 North Shore Trail North, right next door. I am the property owner, and I'm extremely concerned as well with the drainage, with the amount of impervious surface that will be on there. We've lived there almost 5 years, and at this point I can tell you, come spring, come fall, when we have heavy rains, we have standing water everywhere. We do have French drains that were installed prior to us living there, and those sometimes do not work. I will be honest with you. They build a structure that's going to be a little bit larger. That really concerns me too, because those gutters are going to be closer to our homes, pushing that water in not only Shirley's direction, but our direction as well. We do get a lot of runoff off the road, as somebody had mentioned on the council, and we don't have curbs there, so obviously we do get considerably moist conditions. So mowing the lawn in the front yard after it rains usually takes about 3 days before I can actually get in there too. So just to kind of keep that in mind. The other thing that I am concerned with is the surveys in the lot lines. I know there's been some discrepancies on that. I haven't seen any full description of the new one myself. I do know that there was an iron monument that was previously in that lot that Mark Johnson did own prior to this year. But that has since been pulled. It's standing there. I have pictures of it. I don't know where it was or how it came from, but it was there too. So just wanted to make note of that as well. So.
What did you want to make note of? The last thing you said?
There was a monument that was noted next door that was actually pulled out of that lot itself. It's standing 4 to 5 feet from that discrepancy of the new survey marker.
Thank you.
What was your address?
7881 North Shore Trail North.
781, okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to the issue? I'll ask one more time. Does anyone else wish to speak to the issue? Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
In addition to the huge amount of floating data that seems to be difficult to pin down on different aspects of this property. I'm also very concerned about the fact that although I'm very much in support of rain gardens per se, for any city or town, we don't have anything on the books that quantify or qualify the different specifications needed for us to make a determination on what this particular rain garden would be like. I would love to see us eventually develop those specifics for rain gardens and have standards that everybody could agree on: ownership, maintenance, the different materials involved, all sorts of different requirements that go around that. But at this present time, we don't have that. And by allowing something undefined other than just a rain garden to provide some substantial relief, I don't think we're in a position to do that. I would like to see us go in that direction eventually, but we're not there. And so when some unnamed engineer gives some hearsay information about this particular rain garden, I think it's so vacuous that we really don't have any way that we can help in this situation other than to deny.
Other comments? Eric?
I guess I have, excuse me, I have more questions than answers on this. I'm very open to alternative ways to, deal with these types of issues and let a house like this get built. However, it's not in our policy, and I think what this does is it sets a precedence for the city. And it sets a precedent saying that this is acceptable. And I'm going through like my list of questions here. Who does the maintenance? Maybe the homeowner does. That's kind of my idea on who should, if they're using this as an alternative to get around the rest of our policy. But then the bigger question is how does the city enforce that? I don't know. And I don't know that we can make some of those determinations without having a much broader, much wider conversation on should we accept rain gardens. I don't oppose them, but I think that there should be a bigger conversation on it. In my brief research on rain gardens, and I will attest, there are other members of this committee that know far more about them than I do. One of the things that I learned was that snow plowing should not go into a rain garden. It blocks them, and this one here happens to sit right next to a driveway. At least on the map that I'm looking at right here. And I would be much more confident if the applicant came prepared, had accurate numbers, had things that some very intelligent architects and designers on our planning commission could understand. I don't think this is the application we should set precedence on. And for that reason, I'm not going to support it tonight.
Other comments? I do have one, and I think the commission typically knows that I'm not a fan of variances on the lake, and I'm not a fan of this one. In regards to the survey and the details of the survey, that stretch of North Shore is really ugly when it comes to survey. There's two sets of surveys. There is the as-platted surveys, and then there was a survey done by the county, I believe it was, 40, 50 years ago, which shifted the lot lines anywhere from 4 to 8 feet west of the as-platted. A number of us, and I live to the east of this lot, have gone to court and monumented our property, and Washington County has upheld every time that it's the as-platted. So I would make sure that that's what comes in, because if it's the county lines, they're wrong, and it'll be upset in the court. So I do know that at least to 79, 35, 25. Give me a second.
79.85.
At least to 30, 79.31 and possibly 79.25 are all staked, whatever they call that legal thing. It comes with an enormous law bill too, I may add.
Torrance,
Pardon me?
a Torrance property?
I don't know, I just wrote a lot of checks to the lawyer. And I got 4 little iron things in the corners of my lot.
Yeah.
So it is very messy in that stretch, and it is very flat in that stretch, all of the houses are. So that's my comment. Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree that this is a vacant lot. It's 100 feet wide. It's a big lot. I really have a hard time supporting the variance. I'd like the applicant to come back and meet the minimum or maximum impervious surface coverage and build a rain garden. I would hope you would do that in addition to meeting the ordinance. I do have some experience with rain gardens, and they do work, and they can be quite an addition and a good use, environmental use of the property. But I can't support relaxing the ordinance with the thought of putting in a rain garden. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to deny the variance based on the fact that there are no practical difficulties here demonstrated by the applicant to build a new home on this vacant lot. There are no unique circumstances to support a variance, and that the proposed proposal we have is not consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning code and the comprehensive plan.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Eric?
Is that the staff recommendation? Those 3 points, is that what you're moving?
I just made them up myself. I don't know.
Oh, it read in order of the 3 things that Donovan presented to us, I believe, and I was curious if those were the words you intended, or?
Do you want to suggest some other wording? I think the fact that there's no practical difficulty, there are not unique circumstances, and it's not consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning is the points I wanted to make.
That was the recommendation in the staff report. I just, is that enough legally, Donovan?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I've got to speak to the presentation here. Not setting myself up as an expert, but I've been on both sides of the table here dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And I cannot condone a presentation like this with information that, first of all, is inaccurate, and secondly, is incomplete. And I just, I mean, even if it was a 0.1% variance they were asking for, I wouldn't have voted for it because I can't, it amazes me that something apparently as important as this comes in this format. I mean, I'm an architect. I'm used to dealing with these kinds of drawings on a daily basis, and I cannot make sense of this.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Call for the question.
I don't hear anything else, so we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. So the decision by the Planning Commission is final unless there's an appeal. If there's an appeal, the applicant has time, I don't know how long that is, Donovan, a week?
7 days. Yes.
7 days to write an appeal. If he has an appeal, then it will go to the city council as an appeal, and they will make a final decision, which may coincide with the planning commissions, it may not. So if there is an appeal, it'll end up at the city council meeting on what day?
It would be, there's a requirement that the appellant gets sent a letter 10 days prior to that. So that would be at least, well, it depends when they appeal. I mean, if appeal was made, there's a chance it could be on that, the 27th city council meeting.
Do the neighbors get
No.
notified of
There's-
that meeting too then?
No.
I'm sorry?
The neighbors don't get
Appeal, the
notified.
neighbors get
Not
informed
officially, but often
They
do
do
that
not.
as a courtesy.
by the city, as a courtesy from the city?
Yes,
And it would be on the website as part of the agenda, correct?
correct.
Thank you all for coming this evening. You're more than welcome to stay for the next one. Next up is application by Timber Ridge Apartments for a PUD amendment, a zoning map amendment, a comprehensive plan amendment. This also will have a public hearing to consider the application. Donovan, I assume you're presenting?
Yes.
Is that it?
I'd like to present as stated, the comprehensive plan amendment, zoning map amendment, and PUD amendment for Timber Ridge Apartments. It's proposed in this corner, the northwest intersection of Everton Avenue and 19th Street Southwest. This is originally known as Gateway Green, a second edition. And the history of this site in development terms begins in 2004, as it was part of the whole Gateway Green development. And what was proposed there was senior housing, assisted living. And it was never built. And then 2006, there was a PUD amendment to build other senior housing. And then at that time, this lot on the east side was platted to have about 9,000 square feet of commercial development. That, of course, was not built. This property has been bank-owned for a while, and Mr. Lambert noticed an orphaned property and decided that after a successful completion of Arbor Ridge over there on 8th Street Southeast, that he wanted to actually present a building that was largely a duplicate of that structure. And so what we have before you is, here's a picture of Arbor Ridge. Timber Ridge is proposed to be similar in coloring and with the earth tones and the screened-in porches, well, or decks, I should say. And let me pull you up the site plan. And so the building is proposed to be toward the rear of this pie-shaped lot. It's somewhat of a difficult site, even though it has some acreage, because on the north and west side is wetlands. On the east side is overhead utility wire easement.
Donovan, did you say on the east side?
I'm sorry, west, yes, this east side has a Northern States Power easement, about 45 feet in width, which would limit, structures being built underneath it. And meanwhile, also after it was, development, first site plan was submitted, the Everton Avenue, which is county jurisdiction, the county came back and said they would request additional right-of-way for eventual Everton Avenue reconstruction. So they're asking for 14 more feet, and so again, Mr. Lambert's working with the county to allow that, and shifted everything to the west in order to do that. The entrance to the site is opposite the existing Gateway Green entrance here, and he's also proposed a sidewalk that actually matches up with the existing sidewalk on the Gateway Green south side, come north and then continuing all along to Everton. At this point, the city's not requiring an Everton Avenue trail because of that uncertainty around that reconstruction. The parking lot, after Mr. Lambert's experience with Arbor Ridge, and finding that it is adequately parked, he's proposed the 99 surface spaces and 57 enclosed spaces for a total of 173. And this is part of the PUD amendment. The original plan for that senior housing and commercial was 95 surface spots, but it calculates as a 2.1 parking spaces per unit ratio for that. The dumpster enclosure is here, located within one of the garage areas. In order to kind of buffer the landscape, the parking lot from public view, Mr. Lambert has proposed a series of trees along the perimeter, spaced about 20 feet apart, as you can see. And actually, he's proposing to take some of the evergreens currently on the site that are about 20 to 25 feet tall and actually reinstall them along these lines, if the development is approved. So they would actually have somewhat mature conifers already there. It's a mixture of maples and spruce there. The fire department has reviewed this and is requiring a fire hydrant up in this northeast corner of the property in order to be able to provide for, in the event of emergency, for adequate fire protection. There's another fire hydrant down here off Everton. I'm sorry, 19th Street Southwest. Mr. Lambert has been in the process talking to Comfort Lake, Forest Lake Watershed District around the wetland buffer, and I think received some good news today regarding a wetland delineation. So we don't have that in a formal notice of a decision, but that is in the process, and that is part of the staff recommendation for approval that all required permits from the Watershed District be obtained. The engineer's comment letter didn't identify any large issues with the project, and the lighting plan as well meets city code as far as light spillover and LED luminaires and height of the light poles. And the PUD amendment pieces that are sought relate to the, as I mentioned, the amount of parking. As also with what was with the flexibility granted with Arbor Ridge, right now the PUD amendment involves increasing the number of percentage of one-bedroom units beyond the code maximum of 20%, and then also related to the a zero parking lot setback on that on the east side due to the expansion of the county right-of-way that's expected. And then I'm looking for my list. Okay, then also the PD amendment involves several apartments that are below the city minimum size of one-bedroom units of 600 square feet. I believe there's 12 units of that size. And also there's flexibility requested on minimum foundation planting, landscaping requirements. And so at this point, staff does recommend a Plan Commission approval of the PUD amendment with the stated 8 conditions. Also, staff recommends a Plan Commission recommendation of City Council approval of the comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use category of Gateway Green's second edition. This is the current future land use category, from highway commercial to high-density residential to allow the development. And also, staff recommends a Plan Commission recommendation of City Council approval to amend the zoning map district classification from B2 highway commercial to MF multiple family. At this point, I'd be happy to take any questions from Plan Commission.
Questions for the city?
Mr. Chair, so just to be clear, you're looking for 3 separate motions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You said there were 12 units that were under the 600 square foot minimum, but you didn't say what they were,
Oh,
what the area, what the size of them is.
size. Here, I'll pull that up.
490,
480,
480 or 490, something like that.
480.
Okay, that's enough, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, 480. Shown here on your screen.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
a couple of questions. First off, you said northwest corner. Did you mean southeast corner of that area?
No,
Direction wacky.
okay, sure. It's this, here's 19th Street Southwest, here's Everton.
Everton goes north and south, right?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
19th goes west.
Correct, so,
Yeah.
So it's that corner, so that becomes, are you talking about the northwest corner of this area
yeah. right
here, the Gateway Green area?
It's not, it's the northeast.
It's still the northeast.
No, it's the northwest
And one
corner.
of the things, Donovan, that I guess I'm concerned about is the accuracy of the stuff that we get to make some decisions on. You know, that, to me, that's northwest corner now. I don't,
It's the northeast.
it's northeast corner of that particular Gateway Green area then.
It's the northwest
Technically.
corner of the intersection.
Northwest quadrant,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
that's a difference.
Now, the other thing that it said, in one spot here, now I couldn't find it again now, but it said 105 parking spaces, and then it says 99 parking spaces. So I'm assuming that the 99 is the accurate
That is
exposed at the outside parking spots in addition to the garages,
Correct.
right?
Yes, 99.
Plus 57 garage
Right, yeah,
spaces.
just 97 surface.
So we've got a total of 156 parking
I
spaces?
thought you said 173.
Total of 173 yeah, between the two, correct?
No, I'm sorry.
99 outside and 57 inside?
Correct, yes, that's 156.
That only gets you to 156, huh?
Yes,
Yeah, so the 173 is incorrect, right?
yeah. I'm sorry, that's a typo.
Okay. I guess, and this is just whatever type of a question, but, and I like this project, and I'm assuming, I kind of like the idea of the fact that you built one over by the high school, and it was successful enough to jump right into another one in Forest Lake, and I think that's a good sign for Forest Lake. But should the city itself be concerned about the number of new apartments versus owner-occupied facilities?
I mean, that could be a larger policy question, but this property is zoned multiple family, for the most part of it. You know, in this area, there are not a lot of apartments, actually. I mean, these could serve some of the retail, serve as, residences for some of the retail workers to the north. But in the zoning code, there's not that, we can't use that as a criteria that there are too many apartments as far as, judging using it to judge a decision, for this sort of application.
Right, I know it's off the path, but is that something that the comprehensive plan would deal with in terms of a balance between the two? Or is that not just one of my daydreams?
I mean, that could be a housing goal that, talks about, housing type balance. But But often that could be, it is a much larger conversation because oftentimes it's multifamily units is where you get your housing affordability. So it's also kind of the countervailing, city goal.
Okay, so another question then is on the Arbor Ridge one, the public part of the deal was exercise area?
Correct.
And on this, there's no path, there's no public park?
There is no public park. This is a PUD amendment. And so, it established, a multiple family building as part of the PUD there. And so.
For the total?
Yes, so even though it's its own multiple family, the PUD overlay doesn't require that second principal use, which was part of the whole Arbor Ridge approval process.
Okay, then what about the 0-foot parking lot setback? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Right now, we had anticipated that there would be, setback for the drainage utility easement and landscaping. But, as, if the county does reconstruct, Everton and needs that full 100-foot right-of-way within the existing 72-foot right-of-way, they're looking for 28 extra feet. And they look for 14 feet from each adjoining property owner, each side, east and west of Everton. And so this was something that came up later, but this would, a 0-foot setback would allow the accommodation for the, so that this project wouldn't be put in a non-conforming status in the future if that right-of-way was expanded.
So that sign that says 15, right above sign that says 15 feet, that would basically go to 0?
That would,
Right to your left there.
yeah.
That essentially you want, the easement's gonna go right to the edge of those parking spots.
Right away is.
The
Right away, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But then you have trees in the right-of-way.
No, this is, I'd like to jump into, this was done by the architect. It's kind of hard to tell where the property lines are.
That's the problem, the architect's always the problem.
Mr. Lambert, maybe you can help me on this one too.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission members, Mark Lambert, the Arbor Ridge developer here at this property. I'm happy to answer questions. I got a little presentation that I'll make real quick for you, but short answer is the reason you're seeing some small variances is this really has been a work in progress in terms of adjusting the site plan. We submitted the site plan and then the county flagged the city to say, we will take 14 feet on your side, we will take 14 feet on the other side. You're putting the trees where the 14 feet is gonna go, you've gotta move your curb line over, or we're gonna condemn your parking spaces. So the whole parking lot moved west, but also crunched down. And so that's where we lost some spaces from the 106 that you called attention to today's 99, is making these adjustments to accommodate the county. It was interesting, the county doesn't plan on doing this till 2022, and their first response was, I had to dedicate 14 feet to them. And then they realized that this property is already platted, so they acknowledged that they couldn't just demand that I give them 14 feet, but they did insist that Donovan require that we move the site over so that we'll be at a 0 lot line. So the plan right now is we have 15 feet from my property line that I own right now to where I can actually begin to build in anticipation that most of it will be taken. My goal is to put the curb line in. We had talked about using big mature trees on both sides. I don't know that I can do that. I think we'll start with the smaller evergreens in anticipation of the condemnation. And then if we lose those, obviously the county will have some obligation to replace those at the time of the rebuild. So much of the confusion that you're seeing with these little numbers, frankly, just happened in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I did bring my city engineer, or my engineer here as well, if you guys have engineering type questions for us. I know Donovan was looking. Engineers, we found, are very precise in their documents. Donovan was just noting that my architect on his landscape plan tends not to be as precise as the civil engineers. So I won't get into that fight, but if that can help Donovan's question, that's what I wanted to do.
Okay, Mark, while you're there, when I visited the site, it looked to me like there was more lowland than what the wetlands delineation marks off. Is there fill needed on that section in the center?
So are you did you walk the delineation line?
Well, no, I didn't know what that line was, so I was pretty much doing it from vehicle access.
What you noticed on the site was there was actually two delineations. The history on this property goes back quite a ways. There was original delineation in '99. There was a second redelineation again in '06. Both of those are what I originally flagged with the wood stakes, which might be what you were saying. Those two numbers were actually recorded on the plat. And so when I first saw the property, I thought, woohoo, my delineation is done. And I quickly found out that no, I had to redelineate, and since it's been so wet and things change, our delineations actually moved in. So Donovan's point today was we have a new delineation line which still allows us to do the site plan that we have here. You'll see that come through on the final plan, but the good news is there was some upland movement, but it doesn't affect our overall site plan.
It just looked to me like the area where the garages are was lowland. Not wetland, but lowland.
And that wasn't delineated as wetland.
It was not?
It was
No,
not.
No, but it is low, so you're gonna need to do some.
Yeah, and I think that was the reason they left me that big pile of fill. This has actually, I think, been owned by a bank for about 8 or 10 years since the economic downturn. So there's a little bit of cleanup and mop up that we've been working through here.
Can I go back to your curb line for a second here? Because
Sure,
I'm really
absolutely.
confused between Donovan and you. So what am I looking at here? Is the whole lot, for the garage, parking lot, all moving west 15 feet kind of?
The original requirement from Ryan at the city engineering was a 10-foot easement. So initially, I dropped my trees in those 10 feet. And then we had a meeting with Ryan, and he said, no, we have to go to 15 in order to keep the trees out of the 10. And then we met with the county, and the county said, no, I'm sorry, you have to go another 4 because we're going to take 14 feet as opposed to 10. So that left me with, plus or minus about, actually it'll turn out to be about 17 feet is the magical number. Right now we're showing 17 feet between the right-of-way and the curb line, 14 of which the county will take, 3 of which we get to keep for our trees to at least, plant this buffer to begin with. So it's a very precise number, and I'm sorry that the documents aren't quite showing that.
So your curb line's going to be about 3 feet from the
eventual county line, and it was the county that actually requested that Donovan have a 0 setback, and they did that because they don't want to have to pay damages for me being non-conforming when they take my 14 feet away. So,
But in fact, the road, they're wanting 50 feet from each side of the center line of the road.
they're wanting 100 feet total
So 50
for
each way.
for their overall designation. By the way, that was just an FYI. I actually had initially a access out the northeast corner of the site as well, which they just simply denied. It was originally in the PUD as a city road. I incorporated in one of our earlier site plans, and they just said, no, you can't have it. It's county road, 600 feet. Use your 19th Street exit, or so. So that was a lot of the shifting around. I do feel pretty proud of the work that Donovan has helped us with. I feel proud of the work that our engineer Matt has helped us with. I think we've really taken a challenging site and really kind of created a very good project here for us, so.
Mike?
I like what you've done with the site, but I'm still got a little confusion here as far as your parking spots on the east side. There's going to be a curb in there.
Yes, sir.
With blacktop. How far is it to where they're taking all your property away?
So the number
gonna
that,
have, like, 3 feet, 4 feet?
the number that you need to know is the plan is being approved at 17 feet from my right-of-way line that I own now to the back of the curb line. The county is going to take, they tell me, 14 of my property.
14 of that.
Yes,
okay.
and so I will have a 3-foot buffer to my curb line.
From that curb line in your parking lot to,
Yep, will be 3 feet that we can try to plant some trees in. Wasn't my choice.
thank you, no. Well, you know, from, you know, the diagrams and things are gonna be
Yep.
changing, I just wanted to.
And I felt so sorry
Your
because-
part's gonna stay the same, so that's.
Mr. Chairman, I felt so sorry because I know that there's been some issues with numbers tonight, but I want to assure you, this was a little more genuine.
It's
in
not
its-
uncommon.
This was a little more genuine in its origin.
We're still on the city part, so
Sure.
if there's any more for Donovan, otherwise we'll come back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So Donovan, you said there wasn't anything major in the comments from the city engineer, right, Ryan?
Right, correct.
So this isn't a large enough project to require, a road around it and I'm assuming all of the radiuses for fire trucks and all that stuff has all been, that's all
Right, yeah,
worked out
there's,
here?
yeah, there's been a big shift around that, the fire lane discussion, where the current fire chief, Chief Newman, believes that they don't really serve the purpose they're intended to. That where they're constructed, they're often too close to safely put a vehicle, especially, a vehicle that's, say, a
That's
$250,000
fine.
vehicle. and-
I-
Yeah.
I'm not bucking for one. But the other thing is, this type of building would require access of the largest rigs that the city has. It looks,
Right.
it looks a little tight.
And we discussed, and that's why, Chief Newman realized that if the current fire hydrant is kind of over here in Everton, I can show it to you, and what, I think it's really great when I talk to him because I always learn something, and as I do with the planning commission as well. But you can see this little red dot here is the fire hydrant. That's roughly where, where the current Gateway Green access is. So jumping back to the site plan, you can see it's approximately right here. And you could fight a fire by pulling a hose right here. But if the fire was over here, you wouldn't want to pull a hose across here because then you couldn't drive across it, really limit access. But if you had a hydrant here,
Yep.
you could then pull a hose all the way across here, around the rear of the property. And still, if it was way over here, you could still pull the hose over here. So, he thought about staging, and this configuration does allow him many options with response.
Okay.
And there's another hydrant just to the east of the building, isn't there?
Across the street.
There are hydrants there's two across the street, but then what happens if, let's say if it's a large fire, you have, multi-jurisdictional response, then you'd have to close this off because you're running hoses across the street. You can't run over hoses. It's not like your garden hose. So you would have to give extra explanations, come around 19th down here. I mean, during emergency response, that's not acceptable.
So Donovan, as you look at I'll say the landscape plan or that part, is there, this would be an opinion, enough of a buffer between that residential area and the business area across the street? Are these trees and the other landscape plans adequate to not be offensive to the apartment dwellers?
That somewhat remains to be seen. These are, auto sales businesses. And I've had some complaints from existing Gateway Green residents around light spillover, lights that aren't directed directly onto the lot. Those have died. I had one, and I addressed the business owner. That's largely an enforcement issue as far as the lights go. I mean, there's also, residential right here that is, would be somewhat equally distant, closer actually to, say, this area.
Yeah.
And once you get over here, in the building is approximately, this location, you're getting further away from the main source of lights here. It's more, the way the way it worked out with the restrictions with the way the site is, the lot, you know, the building was put further back, and it does provide a bit of that. There's that distance provides something of a buffer.
Other questions? Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Donovan, I do have a few questions. I want to make sure that we understand the process here, and we would be making a recommendation to the city council on this item. This is not a final decision on our part, right?
Correct. We actually, there's a preliminary, this is a preliminary PUD amendment. So we would have to come back for a final PUD amendment. So.
Well, the final would come back to us, or go back to
Correct.
just
The final,
council?
yes, it's a total of 4 public meetings for a PUD.
Okay.
And the zoning code specifies that a PUD amendment has the same process as a PUD, you know, original.
Okay,
New one.
and the application here requires a zoning amendment because part of the property is zoned commercial and part of it's multiple family.
Correct.
A comp plan amendment because part of it is guided for commercial and part of it's guided for multiple family, correct? And then the preliminary PUD agreement. And I think before we get into too much discussion, I mean, for me to discuss the rezoning and the comp plan amendment, I'd want to discuss the details of the site plan in order to see if that supports, for my sake, supports the reason to rezone and to do the comp plan amendment. And the applicant has asked for a PUD, and he's asked for a PUD because there's variances, or he wants to be a little more creative in his site planning to fit the project in the site.
Well, I mean, there is an existing PUD here. You know, that was one thing that we went through, we examined the old documents.
Well, he wants to, okay, well, then he wants to amend the PUD, is what you're saying.
Correct. Yeah, no, you know, I specified the, you know, related to the parking and the setback from the with the parking lot, unit sizes, unit mix.
I see.
That sort of thing.
But the overall plan here to amend the PUD, the whole thought is to allow for a little more creative design, it's kind of a give and take between the developer and the city in order to set aside the zoning code issues. We can talk about the site design and what might be good for the city versus what's good for the developer.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of the process that you go through with a PUD, right?
Yeah.
And there is one part of our ordinance, though, that talks about residential PUDs having a minimum area of continuous upland area of 7.5 acres. This doesn't have that. This has, I forget what it was. This was 5.2 acres gross with 3.4 net. So it's well below the 7.5 acres required by the PUD ordinance.
If it needed to meet that threshold, but the original Gateway Green was something like 21 acres. And so that's when it met that threshold of that minimum acreage. And so
So that's your interpretation, that this is really still part of the big neighborhood?
Yes.
Well, then, is this property part of the HOA, the big neighborhood? I mean, people that will move into this building, will they be able to use the trails and the parks and everything in the big HOA?
Those park areas were actually dedicated as public parks as part of the original development process. So that, yes, they can use those.
They can?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of some of them, that orphan status that I mentioned, that actually they were kicked, this piece of property was separated from the master HOA, so that no HOA actually exists for this property.
So it's not part of it then?
Not in that sense. And it's largely a private contract, and the city really doesn't have much say in those. But we did receive a assessment from the city attorney that this is a PUD amendment.
Okay. Other questions of the city?
I do have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
At that intersection, going into the development, there's some monumentation. There's kind of some white fencing and some on both corners of that. And it kind of announces an entrance into the neighborhood. Would that be maintained? Would that be kept? Or is that going to be changed? Or how is that? How would that, maybe that's a little side issue that can be addressed by the applicant at a later date, but I'd be interested in knowing what they're going to do there with entrance into the neighborhood, because this is part of the neighborhood.
Right, right. I mean, at this point, that fencing area is not included in the site plan. So I
Right.
assume it will be torn down. There was never I mean, there's some concept drawings in the original PUD booklet for a multifamily structure, but it never reached the level of the 2006 PUD amendment did actually have a 1.5 story structure that, as part of the PUD amendment, that's, it's requested to change to, something of a mixture shingle, the enclosed, decks, both have sloping roofs. So it is part of the PUD amendment to change that appearance. I've encouraged the applicant to bring in some more of those smaller elements, and I hope he does include those. But specifically that gate is not included. I mean, that fencing there on the corner is not included.
Well, maybe you can let the applicant know sometime that as one member of the planning commission, I will press for extra standards on this site. I will look for extra details in order to support a rezoning and a comp plan amendment. I think the developer needs to step forward and present some details that makes this site special. I'll leave it at that for right now.
Would the applicant, I think we're done with the city for a little bit. Would the applicant like to say a few words?
Love to. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, Mark Lambert. I'm a many-year visitor of Forest Lake. I guess I think many of you remember the history from Arbor Ridge. I've owned the Woodland Mobile Home Community for now 9 years. As part of that, we had a little extra land that was 7.4 acres. On the backside of that, with your help about 2 years ago, we were able to work through and allow us to build Arbor Ridge. Obviously, many of the issues that we vetted during the Arbor Ridge process, I took note and took lessons and learned, and we built the Arbor Ridge building. As you know, that was exactly 73 units. I think our parking count there was about 110 spaces and approximately the same on the garages. I think we had some concerns about some of the variances or the deviances that we were asking for at the time. And if you've had a chance to be through the building or be by the building, I will tell you that it's been a resounding success. We were 100% occupied the day we opened. We were actually 100% leased about a month before we opened. And so there was quite a number of people in the community that were very surprised when they came to the open house to find out that we didn't have any units available. So I think we did collectively as a planning staff, as a regulating body, the Planning Commission, the City Council, I think we did a terrific job of identifying a great need. And I didn't really intend when I started Arbor Ridge to build Timber Ridge, but one of the problems that you have with developers is they tend to lack a little self-control. And so I happened to learn of this Timber Ridge site and have, I think, vetted it very carefully along the lines of some of Commissioner Black's concerns. It is a little bit of a difficult site because it's a pie-shaped, and as those of you that know the development or business world or building world, square is the best, and of course you never quite have that. And obviously, if you don't have wetlands, other than the aesthetics, it's a lot easier to build on the sites. And so we've certainly worked through a lot of the details on this. What I like about what we're doing here is, as somebody suggested, we'll have a Timber Ridge West, we'll have an Arbor Ridge East. We have a couple of options. Collectively, we'll have about 146 units that will be available. We'll cross-market to each other, and I think we'll offer really a great product. I don't expect the parking to be a problem based on the number of stalls that we have over at Arbor Ridge. I think we'll still have surplus stalls available here. I don't expect that to be an issue. I've been very concerned about this site as well because of its location and proximity to the automobile dealerships. There is a fair amount of kind of light that comes off of there. There is the audio speakers that come off of there. Some of my earlier site plan versions actually had the building being north-south, with most of the east side of the building kind of looking out over the commercial buildings. And it didn't take very long for us to say, boy, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's swing the building so it's east-west, the orientation you see. Let's add the garages in the forefront to kind of give us some additional buffering. So I think we've been very, very mindful of what we've done. We have reviewed the PUD requirements that were originally in place. The whole story here, just for the record, is this was originally a 100% multifamily site in 2004. And in 2006, a developer got the idea that they didn't need all of it for senior housing, so they went through a whole process and took 80% of the site, Lot 1, and made it multifamily or left it multifamily. In 2006, they submitted a comp plan amendment to make it commercial. They submitted a rezoning request to make it commercial. And so it has sat in that status now for 11 years. And obviously, I think that's been part of the problem because it's really too small of a piece to be good commercial and not big enough of a piece to be good multifamily. And so as I went through, a stack of documents this high on the PUDs and the various changes, it certainly seemed to me to be evident that we should be rezoning this back to multifamily, which was the original dedication in 2004. The other thing that has come up is this question of are we part of the association? We are part of the PUD that originally approved the property. So what we're asking for is an amendment from the 2006 amendment. This is actually the second amendment on the site. The 2006 amendment said it's okay to have senior housing and commercial. With this second amendment that I'm asking for tonight, we're really going back to the original 2004 vision, which was that this would all be multifamily. So while it feels like it's a change, from commercial to multifamily, I would suggest to you that what it really is going back to the original intent of what Gateway Green was before that 2006 developer got a hold of it and zoned Lot 1 commercial and did the comp plan amendment commercial. So as you kind of judge us with what you're looking at here, keep in mind a long history on the site. Keep in mind that I think it's a terrific location, and I think that we have a great vision and we have a product that was very successful. And frankly, I guess I'd like your permission to do it again. My news tonight was I guess I get to come see you guys 4 times. I didn't know that. I thought it was twice. So obviously, any math corrections we need to make, we're going to have another visit with you to kind of get the final on the math. But to the extent that I've got multiple appearances before you, I'd ask for your support. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, I hear your concerns. I think that we've addressed a good deal of them. I guess I would ask for your indulgence on that white fence. It's actually completely blown over on the south side of 19th. It doesn't seem like the association is taking care of their side of it. I've looked at it. It's a white plastic vinyl fence that really kind of almost sticks out into the right-of-way. So I'm not sure that it would really enhance our development. And I guess the concern that I really have is I think when the county does their rebuild, I think it's going to get taken out as part of that 14 feet anyway. So while I certainly know it's there, and I certainly want this building and this development to be terrific, I don't know that white vinyl fence is an element that would really make that. We have agreed at the city's request to spend approximately $50,000 to build at our cost the city sidewalk on the south end of the property. Donovan noted that I generously offered that, and I will reaffirm that we are generously offering that as a requirement by the city engineer. So I think our intent is to be a good neighbor to Gateway Green, and I think the addition of our sidewalk there is evidence of that intent. So I guess I would ask for any questions that the planning commissioners may have.
Let me clarify one thing for you. I believe, Donovan, he takes 2 visits to us and 2 visits to the city council, 4 total.
Yes.
Not 4 to see us.
So
Although
I'm not-
we are a fun committee to come see.
So only 2?
You only see us one other time
Oh.
after tonight,
Can I come
unless,
back for fun?
well, depends how this goes, you may be back for a
Okay.
third. I do have one question regarding the apartment size. So is this building, were the apartments as small as this?
Yes.
In Arbor Ridge? It's been a couple.
Mr. Chairman, this is the exact building as Arbor Ridge. And what we found is we have one bedroom studio apartments, we call them, at the 480 square feet. We've got some at 600. And what we find is that there are folks that are just looking for a smaller unit at a little less rent. Our market over there was some seniors, some working professionals, some people that have a cabin up north at Light Forest Lake as a midpoint, some families. So we really had just a terrific mixture of people in the building. Obviously, we've been operating now for 3 months, and to my knowledge, no police calls and no issues with our residents that required us to evict them if we had to.
Other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
one thing that you're talking about, the trash dumpsters are going to be within a garage? So is it totally enclosed, like in a building?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, that's not quite correct. We have the enclosure, but we don't have it roofed. So I think we're all concerned about screening. So we've kind of built it into what would have been the footprint, but our intent is not to have a roof on it, nor can we because of the actions of the trucks dumping the trash.
And then it says the 20 tall light poles, does that mean 20 foot?
Yes, sir.
Tall?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, yes.
Okay, then now you have operated a pet-friendly place. So, but there's no provision on that property for a walking path. Is that something that you would consider as opposed to paying to the parks and fees to do some kind of a walking path around the building or somewhere where the people can, or are you counting on them walking across the street to go to the public park?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, I'm expecting that they'll use our sidewalk that we've installed. They'll cross over to Gateway Green, and they have the ability to go into the public parks at Gateway Green. In addition, the county's made it pretty clear that they're going to be adding a sidewalk structure that'll start from 19th and, well, maybe even farther and go all the way up to the commercial district. So I think by the time the county gets done, we'll certainly have an extensive trail system. But in the meantime, yes, I'm expecting them to use our neighborhood.
So it does say that there would be no trail needed along Everton. So the county's going to, that's in the county's plan to do that?
I believe it would be. It's actually in the open space and park plan to have a trail along Everton is a high priority trail. So, the city would
It'll go
advocate.
from there to Broadway?
Yeah, basically from, what's 11th Avenue all the way up to Broadway.
Good.
Is the trail extent.
Okay, last question is water and the use of water is a hot topic in the area, particularly with White Bear Lake, the way that they are. Is there any concern or any possibility of using rainwater for irrigation as opposed to the city water?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, I certainly would welcome that discussion. We've had some tentative discussions with the Comfort Lake Watershed District on stormwater ponding, and I know that that was a solution that was incorporated into a nearby building. So I guess if that's something that, well, frankly, I guess the answer is why wouldn't I? Obviously, the city water is expensive. We had some discussions on some wells at Arbor Ridge, so if I have the opportunity to do that and we can find a solution, I certainly will.
But would it need to be a well or just using the rainwater
It would-
runoff?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, it would be using rainwater. The problem with rainwater is obviously, we
Not
do a
reliable.
fair amount of landscaping, correct? And if it's a dry summer, then we find ourselves still needing it. So I think it's the idea of trying to build a tank to collect it, being able to drain that tank in the summer month, or in the winter months, and yet still have an adequate flow if we don't have enough to fill the tanks as part of the overall rainwater process.
Other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I just was looking through the graphics earlier here for some kind of graphic on the garages. Can you give us some idea what they're gonna look like? There doesn't seem to be anything in your presentation. on
Mr.
the
Chairman,
garages.
Commissioner Batty, I believe there was an elevation submitted, Donovan, did it not make it into the
Let's
plan?
look. Might have to go into the original submission that we're hitting.
I don't think it's in
48
ours.
pages on this one, and so I had
I
to
understand.
do some editing.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Batty, the intent is that they would be identical to the Arbor Ridge, the hip roofed brick, about 36 inches or 42 inches, and then a similar looking appearance.
And those at Arbor Ridge are behind the apartment building. These are all in front of the building.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, yes, they are. And again, I struggled with that, but I guess at the end of the day, I was more concerned about our proximity to the automobile dealerships and the ability to use those garages as a buffer and focus the kind of wetland area, if you will, as being kind of the key mark of the building, as opposed to putting the garages closer to the wetlands and having the building out towards the dealership.
Oh, there you go.
There they are.
So can you tell us, I'm curious about you said you've gotten more up-to-date information on the wetland. It sounded like it was favorable from what Donovan said. Can you give us an idea of, what?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Batty, the wetland delineation was plus 10 feet or less along the existing delineated line. Currently, we have a 16.5 foot recorded wetland buffer, which was what the buffer was in 2006 on our plat. So all of our planning for the building was starting 16.5 feet out from that wetland buffer line. All of the delineations today was well within that buffer line. So the good news that Donovan had mentioned was the fact that our buffer was more than enough to compensate for the additional 6 to 10 feet in a couple of areas where the wetland came closer.
So, there isn't any chance, it doesn't sound like it's enough to maybe move that, slide the building and the parking to the northwest, which, closer to the wetlands so that you could get away from your I'm just concerned about you trying to plant trees in 3 feet.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Batty, it wasn't that much. It is tight, and I had the best laid plans until the county got a hold of me with the right of way, and I don't know what to tell you.
No, it's not anything that
I'm
just trying to.
They were very clear that they're going to take their 14 feet and plan accordingly, and so we've tried to kind of do our best with that and make accommodations for it.
Do you know at the time that they do that reconstruction, I realize it's 5 years away, but are they going to have like turning lanes and that kind of stuff? Is that why they're going to go that wide?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, what I understand they're going to do is they're going to have a 3-lane configuration, I guess, where you'll have the 2 drive lanes and then kind of a center turn lane is what it sounded like.
Mike? Mr. Lambert, is there a sidewalk currently along 19th Avenue on the north side of the road, in the existing development?
Mr.
On your
Chairman-
side?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, there is a stub of a sidewalk on the south side. So we've made our designs so that the sidewalk will cross to match the sidewalk on the south.
I see. So there is no sidewalk on the north? Okay. The ends of the garage, I'm a little bit, you know, I love your development in Arbor Lakes. I think you did a great job. And I think this can work out great too. I'm looking to make it a little, you know, I don't want to just take the footprint and put it on here. I'm looking to see a little more attempt to do a little bit better job wherever we can. On the ends of the garages, as we drive in, you're going to see the garages, unfortunately. And it's nice that you got garages for the people that are going to live there, but you're going to look at the garages. Is there any way on the ends of those garages we could dress those up? Could we brick the ends? Facing the street? Could we put bricks on those ends, make it a little bit more, dress it up a little bit?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, certainly we can take a look at that. One of the elements that I've used in the past is if I've tried to avoid the blank, I've actually added blackened windows, which ironically make it feel a little more residential. So maybe what I can do in my next visit to you would be to kind of give you maybe a little more detail on how we could dress those ends of those garages up, because frankly, that's a good point I hadn't thought about, is that 19th is going to get a little more of a view on those end caps than what maybe I had thought of. So I think trying to find some windows, and typically what I've done, Commissioner Black, has been to put brick halfway up, and I think that might wrap the end cap as it is, but I guess I'd certainly be willing to offer to wrap the end cap with that half up brick and then maybe adding a couple of windows, and that might give you a little more of a residential flair.
Appreciate that. I think whatever you can do, I think would be good. I also don't like really the trash enclosure, the first thing you see as you come in, but I'm not sure if there's a better spot for it. And I think you've done a nice job on the one in Arbor Lakes. I mean, it is a trash enclosure and it's well screened, and I know you don't want to put a roof on it, and I can understand that. And
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, the other issue that you run into is I can't tell you how many, I'll go hundreds of thousands of dollars that those garbage trucks have cost us because they come in so heavy. And then they come and they fulcrum the trash. And then they, if you're not careful, you design your whole site so that blessed truck has to go all throughout your whole parking lot before it gets back onto the city street to continue to wear and tear on those. So I guess what I'm suggesting to you is we were very careful, or methodical anyway, in locating it near that entrance, but screened so that we can get the truck in, we can get the truck out, and we can have it fulcrum. You'll notice there's a concrete slab there. We can have it fulcrum on that concrete slab so that we're not damaging our parking lot for long term.
maybe you can pay a little attention to the exterior enclosure, maybe use a Trex deck, like a Trex decking material that would be not require permanent maintenance on it, so that it keeps its beauty over the years. And
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, I might do one better for you. I might have your brick line on that edge. I guess my envision of that was to have the end cap match the other end caps, albeit without the roof line, but at least to have some of the brick and some of the elements there.
Another point, I was real encouraged to hear that there are some beautiful evergreen trees on this property, and I'm pleased to hear that you're considering transplanting some of those along the perimeter. I think that would be a great idea, especially along 19th there. I don't know, I would like to do it along Everton, but I'd hate to have you do that and then have the county come through and take them out when they regrade or do whatever they're going to do to that right away. I think you still need to put some type of trees in there tight to your parking lot where you can to landscape that along Everton. But I'd like to see more screening along 19 too. Certainly for the first 100 or 200 feet as you come into the project to help kind of screen that as you come in.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, initially my intent was obviously our trees are 300 to 500, spading trees are 300 to 500. These are a little bit bigger, so I'm getting a little concerned as to how many of those we can do. Obviously, it's a beautiful element if we can add it on 19th. I had hoped to do it on Everton, but as you suggest, I think that ship sailed with the county and their upcoming taking of the property. But it's my intent and my commitment to the commission to try. Again, this is something where, I'm also held to an escrow that has to have these trees grow and live, and, or I'm held back on money, et cetera. So I'm going to do a good faith intent to do it, and let's see if we can get that done for you.
One other question. Can you tell me a little bit about that area behind the building? It's just showing a square area right now on the site plan. In visiting the Arbor Lakes or Arbor Point development, I didn't walk in there, but it appears that it's an enclosed area. Can you describe that a little bit for me?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, that is a nice patio area. We actually have a roofed area with a couple of grills. We have patio heaters, and we actually have a fire pit back behind there as well. I think Donovan's scrolling. Did we provide you a photo of that,
Yeah,
Donovan?
there's a little more detail in one of these.
So we might have a
Yeah.
photo for you.
That our architect provided it.
Hooray for the architect.
I would encourage you to take a look at, there seems to be additional upland area back there that could be usable space. I think it was Commissioner Lee asked the question about perhaps a dog run. You do allow pets in the building?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, we do.
Well, that could probably be an area where you could put a fenced-in area. I've seen those in other apartment buildings where they have a little fenced-in area. It's a little dog park, and the dogs can all run in and enjoy each other's company and do their business. And that would probably be an ideal spot for that. I guess I'm encouraging you to add whatever you can in those site plan details in order to get my support for your rezoning and in-comp plan amendment.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Black, we'll do that.
Any other questions for the applicant? Getting a little quiet, so thank you. We may have you back up here. This is a public hearing. We asked if you would like to address this issue, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Tell us your feelings about this application. After we've heard from everyone who's interested, we will close the public hearing, and then we'll bring it back to the commission for recommendation to City Council. So officially open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to address this issue? I'll ask the second time. Does anyone wish to address this issue? Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing, bring it back to the commissioners for a recommendation. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, can you kind of just distinctly give us the three things? Is there going to be a sequence, or what's the best sequence? Do we need to do the comp plan change first, then the rezoning, and then the PUD, or does it make any difference?
It makes a difference, I believe, if you, that the comp plan, I mean, actually, this case, there are recommendations, so I don't think that the order matters. I'd ordered it in terms of just where I thought, if there was a recommendation of denial somewhere along the way that, that it wouldn't upset, like the first one was a PUD amendment that, didn't go forward well, then it would be a small multifamily. I mean, but it was basically, it's, I believe a proper order is the order of the PUD amendment, then the comprehensive plan amendment, then the zoning map amendment.
Thank you, Donna, for the clarification. Eric?
I don't know how many of you toured the facility he recently built that is designed identical to this, but it's actually one of the nicer apartment buildings that I've ever seen, and in all honesty, I was surprised quite pleasantly at it. I have no issue that I can see at this point in the stages. I think the applicant did good work in listening to council and commission comments last time. I think he's going to take some of the comments from other members and incorporate them as best as possible. And I quite frankly hope this one sells out more than a month sooner. I think it's a great plan for that area. And so that said, I'll move the PUD amendment recommendation to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have Eric and Steve. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like, I will vote in favor of the motion. I would like the applicant to make note of our discussion tonight, and when the application comes through for the, is it the final PUD and the more site plan details, I would hope that the discussions we've had will reflect some of the details that we've talked about.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to also make a motion that the Planning Commission recommended the City Council approval of the comprehensive plan amendment to change future land use category of Gateway Greens Second Edition, Block 1, Lot 2, from highway commercial to high-density residential.
I'd second that.
A motion by Steve, a second by Gary. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
And Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make a motion that staff recommends the Planning Commission recommendation to City Council approval to amend the zoning map district classification of Gateway Greens Second Edition, Block 1, Lot 2, from B2 highway commercial to MF multifamily.
And I would second that.
Steve motion, Gary second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good luck with your project. See you soon.
Good work.
We have moved to the most exciting part of the meeting, the other section. Donovan, any announcements for us?
I'll say that the Comprehensive Plan Task Force is continuing its work and plans to meet on November 28th. We do not have a meeting on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I think that's the 22nd. Because I think we have very negative results for the applicants if you were hauled in here the night before Thanksgiving. And I'm happy to take any questions from the Planning Commission.
Question for Donovan? Anybody else for the discussion? Mike?
Just for discussion, I know Ben Winnick, we've had many discussions about the trees and stuff over there, and he's decided to wait till spring to plant new trees and do his work over there, correct?
That's the game plan. I'm not, yeah.
Is there any way, or has anybody in the city sent him some sort of a notice that says, this needs to be done by a certain date, or else? I mean, or else might sound kind of bad, but if we don't put a date on it, it might not, let's do it in the fall, and I don't know.
I'll have an update for you at the next Plan Commission meeting, but there has been no official notice, like that.
Okay, I didn't know if there was talk or anything about, sending him something, informal form.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Gary? You had something?
The other question I had is that, does everybody get the, what do they call it now, the leadership report? Does everybody get that? Okay. I thought it was very well done with the addition of the building permit information this time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was very meaningful. It's really exciting to see the number of building permits, both dollar-wise and numbers of them that have been issued. Now, I suppose that a lot of that goes from storm damage, probably roofs and those kind of things.
Yeah, a lot of roofing, a lot of siding this summer.
So it might be distorted a little bit just because of the storms, but there's still a lot of activity building new structures in Forest Lake. That's a good thing.
Anything else, commissioners? Hearing nothing, the chair will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Scott with the motion, Eric with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you all for your participation this evening.
Oops.